Thank you for joining us. It's always great to sit down and talk about politics and policy with the governor of Massachusetts, Her Excellency Maura Healey. Governor, welcome.
Good morning, John.
Always good to have you. Appreciate you coming over.
Good to be here.
On the day that we're taping, it happens to be the 10th anniversary of the Supreme Court ruling legalizing gay marriage. In recent months, Republican lawmakers in 10 states have introduced bills aimed at sort of weakening or undermining same-sex marriage rights. What are your thoughts on this anniversary and on that movement? Do you think, given what else is going on in the country, it can succeed?
Well, what I do know is it's a non-issue here in Massachusetts. I mean, marriage is marriage, whether you're gay or not. And that's the law here. It's going to continue to be that way. And you know what people really care about? They care about how they're going to pay their bills. Can they afford a home? You know, do they have access to jobs and economic mobility? That's what I'm focused on as governor. And I will certainly make sure that we defend the rights of all to marry in our state, and that people, gay and straight, that their rights, their freedoms are protected.
All right, well, let's move on and talk about paying our bills.
I'd also say the same on abortion access, too. You know, this is the third anniversary of the Supreme Court's decision overturning Roe v. Wade.
Right.
And I'll also just say that abortion rights, abortion access, access to reproductive health care is non-negotiable in Massachusetts. We're going to continue to protect that right, continue to protect patients, providers, and others who need that care.
All right. Energy costs have been very high here for many, many years, well before you became governor, some of the highest in the nation. And it's a major driver of the sky-high cost of living around here. You've been an advocate, as your predecessors were, for very ambitious clean energy goals, reducing greenhouse gas emissions by at least 50% by 2030. That's just 5 years from now. You've taken a number of steps to contain consumer costs. We don't really have the time to go over all of that, but it's been in the news. But doesn't the unaffordable cost for a lot of people to go green, combined with NIMBYism on pipelines and energy-generating plants, combined with the current lack of federal support for things like wind power, doesn't that mean that that emissions reduction goal has to be rethought?
Well, I'll tell you where we are right now. We need to get as much energy into the region as possible. I've been saying this for years. And I don't really care what form of energy that is, John. I just want more supply so that we can drive costs down. The Northeast, as you say, has experienced higher costs for many, many years. I've taken action, okay?
Does this mean I'm sorry to interrupt, does this mean you're dropping your past opposition to new gas pipelines?
The gas infrastructure, we already have gas coming in, okay?
Right.
And I support that. What I also will say is it's very important that we continue to build out solar, that we bring wind on, battery storage. We need to do everything.
Nuclear, you're calling for?
There is a reason that the states, you know the states in this country that have the fastest growth in wind and solar? Texas, Louisiana, you know, so-called red states, because this is where we need to go. Everybody needs energy. We're consuming so much energy now with our devices, with AI coming, and so we need to get as much energy into the region. It's why I convened bipartisan, all the New England governors and the state of New York, along with the Canadian premiers recently, to have a discussion about how we can bring more energy into the region from Canada. We've got hydro coming online this year from Canada to Massachusetts. That's important. But I also took action the other day, John. I filed legislation to strip away from people's bills unnecessary charges, and I'm continuing to lean on the utility companies. I am laser focused on driving down people's energy bills.
Well, some of what you've tried to do, like, for instance, cracking down on private competitive energy suppliers who have turned out to be somewhat predatory, has gotten bogged down in the legislature. Why?
Well, you know, I think that's a piece of it. You know, that's not the end-all and be-all of reducing people's energy costs. Fundamentally, we've got to get more energy supply into the region. But we did file legislation that said on that issue, you can have competitive suppliers here, but they just can't be ripping people off, okay? So I think with that, we'll be able to get that through the legislature.
Oh, you think you will be able to get that through?
I do. Before,
because the lobbyists seem to be successful in blocking it.
But that's because there were attempts made before to ban them altogether.
Okay.
And what I'm saying, John, is no, we don't have to ban them altogether, but we just have to make sure that they're not preying upon people and engaging in exploitive practices, right? Basic consumer protection. I think we do that. We'll get that done.
I want to get into some other topics here, but we were just talking about lobbyists on Beacon Hill. Are they a problem for your agenda? What are the most obstructionist lobbies on Beacon Hill?
No, I work with a whole host of stakeholders every day.
You don't have a problem with anybody? With regard to any of the big-time lobbies on Beacon Hill?
No, look, at the end of the day, John, we're in a business where they're competing interests. People have different things that they're advocating for. My job as governor is to make sure I'm getting the best information and making the right moves, what I think are the right moves for the state. That's why, as you know, my record the last 2 years, what have I focused on? What have I done? I've cut taxes. I've built more homes to lower costs. I've worked on fixing the T and actually get it moving again, and making sure that Massachusetts is #1 in education. The ratings just came out, and we are. So, my job is to make sure I'm getting information. I'm working with a range of constituents to get things done and deliver for people on the things that matter most.
Well, speaking of education, at their annual convention this past spring, the Mass Teachers Association gave an award to Stacey Davis Gates, the president of the Chicago Teachers Union. She and her union are the targets of a defamation suit filed by our new state education commissioner here, Pedro Martinez, claiming he was personally and professionally vilified and lied about by Gates and her colleagues. Gates compared Martinez at one point to a, quote, terrible special education student who can't be suspended. Now, between that award and the MTA's recent excursion into anti-Semitic propaganda on its website, what do you make of the attitude of this union, and how do you deal with them going forward?
Oh, John, look, I support our educators. We just started summer. People have worked really hard. Teachers have, parents have, students have. I wish everybody a good summer. I'll also say that I'm really focused on making sure that we're delivering for our kids. And that's why in a bill I signed the other day, I was able to put serious money, hundreds of millions of dollars, to making sure we have the best education for our students. What does that look like? It means more literacy in our schools. It means more high-dosage tutoring, one-to-one instruction with students so that we're closing learning gaps and closing learning loss that we experienced through the pandemic. I'm proud of the selection that I made to appoint Pedro Martinez, not that Pedro Martinez, but a different Pedro Martinez that Boston and Massachusetts will come to know and love because of what he's going to do for education.
The most powerful teacher union in the state just gave an award to a woman who's being sued for defamation by your new hire. That doesn't augur well.
I'm not going to get into all that.
Really?
You know who I answer to? I answer to parents. I answer to young people. That's my job. Massachusetts, we're home to the first school in the country in our nation's history. Yeah. And we've prided ourselves on education. And not only am I making transformational investments in things like high-dosage tutoring and literacy, we're also investing in career technical training in our high schools, more vocational seats. We've got to continue to build on a great education system that we have here. Pedro Martinez is going to help us do that.
What about the anti-Semitic material that the MTA indulged in? Did that bother you?
I shut that down immediately. I had direct conversations with union officials asking them to remove that from the website. I've also said, because we've seen a rise in anti-Semitism around this country and even incidents here in Massachusetts, there is no place for anti-Semitism. I don't tolerate it. And we all need to work together to speak out, to denounce that kind of bigotry and hatred and racism and xenophobia, right, in all forms.
Last thing before we wrap here, and you'll be back for part 2 of this conversation. A couple of tax issues are kind of floating around. You recently caused a stir with some remarks that you want to see the numbers on the impact of the millionaire's tax on investors and leaving the state and so forth, and you're going to keep an open mind on that. And also the estate tax. You wanted eliminating the estate tax for up to $3 million. The legislature did $2 million. What about those two taxes? Are you coming back for more on the estate tax, and are you seriously thinking about backing off the millionaire's tax should it prove to be toxic in some way?
Well, as CEO of the state, I'm really focused on how do we make Massachusetts more affordable? How do we make it more competitive? I want it to be a place where families can afford to grow, to stay here. Young people can come to school here and grow families here, grow businesses here. Businesses here can expand other businesses. We want to see them come to Massachusetts and invest. And so I always keep an eye on economic policy and what's happening, and also, our tax system, our tax structure, what that's getting us, what that's not getting us. Because my job, John, is to make sure that I am maximizing the return on all taxpayer dollars. The other day, using the revenues from the surtax, I was able to make a one-of-a-kind, first time ever, $8 billion investment in transportation, which the business community supports. Fixing our roads and bridges, easing commute times, stabilizing the financial footing of the T, and also making important investments in education. So, that's how I approach this and continue to seek the input from a variety of stakeholders and interests in the state, interests that are about making Massachusetts more affordable and more competitive.
Are you done with the estate tax real briefly here, or are you coming back for more on that?
I want to continue to evaluate things. Let's get through this session.
Okay.
I made my position clear on the estate tax. Massachusetts is an outlier. I do not like us being an outlier. The legislature, went a certain distance, not as far as I wanted them to go the last round, but we've got to get through this budget right now, and I'm going to continue to stay focused on just general economic policy, what it's getting our state, how it's positioning Massachusetts, especially in a time, John, where, all states, I'll tell you, I talked to all governors, we're all facing a lot of challenges because of tariffs and other things that the federal administration is doing that aren't helping us economically.
All right. Well, perhaps we'll get into that a little bit more in part 2 of our interview. Governor, thank you so much. Next week, the election is 16 months away, but already the governor's challengers are showering her with criticism. Governor Healey's turn to respond next Sunday here on WBZ.